Welcome back, guys. I have another update for you, which is the case of Pauline Brazeau, which is from my video 5 Unsolved Indigenous Teen Murders in Canada that I covered a little over 3 years ago. If you haven't watched that video, please go back and do so. And just a heads up, it was one of my first, so I apologize for how it sounds. I think actually one day I'll redo my older ones and repost them because, well, they're kind of embarrassing. Anywho, to recap Pauline's case. Pauline was a 16-year-old single mother from Saskatchewan, Canada. Pauline was Métis and had just relocated to Calgary, Alberta in the fall of 1975 with her 9-month-old daughter and her older sister Nancy, so just a few months before she was murdered. Like I said, Pauline was Métis, but none of her immediate family had grown up on a First Nation. She grew up in a small house in Yorkton, Saskatchewan with 8 other people. Her parents, her siblings, and 2 cousins her parents took in when her aunt died. She was described as a beautiful girl, outgoing and friendly. Pauline was found stabbed to death on January 8th just outside of Calgary. On the evening before, I guess that would be January the 7th, 1976, which was 47 years ago, mind you. Keep that in mind, it was nearly 50 years ago. It's back to the night of January the 7th. She was having drinks in her aunt's apartment in Calgary's West End. She and a friend left to get pizza around 2:30 a.m. After finishing up their pizza, they took off, but Pauline couldn't find her gloves. So she decided to retrace her steps back to the pizza shop. And if you have spent any time in Calgary, Alberta in January, you understand why she did that, because it's enough to freeze you. But Pauline still couldn't find her gloves, so she left again. And she has never been seen alive again to this day. Approximately 8:30 a.m. the next morning, January the 8th, she was found partially clothed and stabbed to death on the Jumping Pound Forestry Road located approximately 22 miles southwest of Cochrane, Alberta, which is a town just outside of Calgary. When I first did this story, it was reported that in the 40-plus years since her murder, there had been no arrests. Actually, the reason why I included Pauline's story with 4 other stories at the time, a couple of years ago, was because there was next to no information on her case to report. But I really did want to cover it. Pauline's case was obviously a cold case with Alberta's RCMP, and was also included in a series called The Highway Murders, which refers to a series of murders involving women who have been raped, murdered, and left in remote areas along the TCH, or the Trans-Canada Highway, for several years. In 1995, the RCMP formed a task force that reinvestigated these unsolved homicides, including Pauline's. Despite extensive investigative efforts, her file remained unsolved until RCMP arrested 73-year-old Ronald James Edwards, a resident of Sundre, Alberta, in November of 2023. He was charged with the murder of Pauline Brazeau 47 years earlier. The arrest and resulting charge was the result of a partnership between the RCMP Historical Homicide Unit and the Calgary Police Services Cold Case Homicide Unit. Calgary Police, I believe Superintendent, I'm not sure, Ryan Aliff, said, quote, "For the last 47 years, Pauline's connection to Calgary has been at the forefront of our investigators' minds, and they worked closely with the RCMP to ensure her case remained a priority." So how did this all go down so many years later? Well, genetic genealogy, of course. The case was reopened in 2021 in an effort to reanalyze historical homicide investigations from the Calgary area that dated back to the 1970s. Alberta RCMP used genetic genealogy to help identify Pauline's killer. And in 2022, the RCMP sought the assistance of a private lab in the United States. Long story short, it led to a suspect that had been living in Sundre, Alberta. Now, Sundre is a town about an hour and 20 minutes southeast of Calgary. Ronald Edwards has been charged with non-capital murder, which was the definition listed in the criminal code at the time of Pauline's death. Calgary police said that based on the evidence investigators have collected, they have no reason to believe that Pauline's murder is connected to other murders around that time. Pauline's cousin, Deborah Poitras, said the family was, quote, "shocked at the murder charges laid 47 years after Pauline was killed." And nearly 5 decades after Pauline was stabbed to death, some of her family members showed up to Ronald Edwards' first courtroom appearance. Her cousin Deborah recalls how she was only 14 years old when her cousin was killed. Both teens had recently moved to Calgary with family members but had yet to meet when Pauline was killed. According to her, her mother and Pauline's father were first cousins and were close. She says her uncle would visit often. She recalled how he would be crying, and she would ask her mother why he was crying, and she would simply reply, quote, "He just lost his daughter recently, and so maybe when he sees you, he thinks about her." Some shocking news about Edward's past and his criminal history surfaced. According to news stories written in 1989, on September 9th, 1989, when Edwards was 39 years old, he was charged with the attempted murder, sexual assault with a weapon, and aggravated sexual assault of an 18-year-old sex trade worker. 3 months later, Edwards pled guilty to attempted murder and sexual assault. Edwards had brought the teenager to his home where he sexually assaulted and attacked her with a large hunting knife, according to a story that was published in the Calgary Herald on December 21st, 1989. The young girl suffered injuries to her face, arms, and hand. The young girl escaped by barricading herself in a bedroom and jumping from a second-story window to safety. And man, that sounds like a teen slasher horror movie. I can't imagine how scared she must have been. The judge who sentenced Edwards to 10 years in prison commented that the victim likely saved her own life by escaping through a second-story window. Also, during the sentencing hearing, the Calgary Herald reported that the prosecutor described Edwards as a, quote, human time bomb, to which Edwards' lawyer countered that his client was remorseful and that his behavior could be controlled if he stopped drinking. Fast forward to today, and Edwards is now accused of murdering 16-year-old Pauline 15 years before he was handed a decade-long prison term for assaulting the young girl. I wonder how many more women there could be out there and young girls that he may have assaulted, possibly even murdered. According to CTV News, in March of this year, so 2024, a 3-week trial has been scheduled for the now 74-year-old for next year in Calgary, and I will keep you posted with any updates. Thank you for taking the time to listen. So I've been working on trying to get this podcast more up to date and giving it more of a social media presence. So please do look it up on Facebook and Instagram as Unjust Crimes. I've also been working on creating a website, which is quite the work in progress, so keep tuned for updates on that. I've also been asked many times in the past how people can donate, which I have to say is pretty amazing that anyone would want to do that, so I've decided to add a PayPal link to my YouTube channel. You can find it on my channel's main page, and I just want to say to anyone that may want to donate, man, thank you so much. In the meantime, please do subscribe and give this video a thumbs up. And until next time, stay safe out there.